My LA Galaxy are the worst team in MLS right now. Thank you very much, DC United. Appreciate it. On the heels of the MLS transfer window shutting, my LA Galaxy are now the worst team in Major League Soccer on the pitch. Done. DC United making some big moves before the deadline. I know the Galaxy got Jonathan Dos Santos. Don't forget that. And this team has talent. Siggy Schmid is the guy to turn this around. But right now, the way they're playing, they're the worst team in MLS. Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Denholm. This is Soccer Weekly on ESPN LA 710, the home for world football here in Southern California, presented by Puente Hills Toyota. Get your new 2017 Toyota Camry LE today at Puente Hills Toyota. Check them out, PuenteHillsToyota.com. It is that what a massive show we have for the beautiful game. Everything coming at you. Not only are my LA Galaxy the worst team in MLS, LAFC has signed their first big name, their first designated player. It's a name familiar to all of us, Carlos Vela. LAFC announcing it via Instagram, of course, it would seem. Yeah, that's exactly what this is. So LAFC, isn't it? That's so LAFC. So Carlos Vela, the Mexican international, is the first designated player, the first real name. No offense to a couple of kids they signed a couple of years ago, but the first real big signing for LAFC as they get ready for their debut next season in MLS. So I'm scrolling through, and this is just so telling. I'm scrolling through Twitter earlier on my feed, which is predominantly soccer, if I'm being honest. And it has the big announcement of Vela, essentially, with just the name, Vela, with the LA as part of their symbol, with the wings and the beautiful. Oh, I hate that symbol, so gorgeous. Hate it. And it's just beautiful, but it says Vela, right, with the LAFC, essentially, the LA part of it. And the next tweet on my timeline is the LA Galaxy tweeting, hey, remember 10 years ago, the opening or the breakthrough of David Beckham coming, or the first appearance? And that's great. That was the biggest thing to ever happen to MLS besides the league forming, and it always will be. But it's so telling right now. LAFC building with all this excitement, and the Galaxy looking 10 years ago. One tweet, two tweets, right in a row. Just very telling. So Carlos Vela is in. We will be talking with Bob Bradley, the head coach, the manager of LAFC, coming up. Yes, this show is jam-packed. We also got ESPN FC Sebastian Salazar. He'll be joining me. We've got news about Rafa Marquez, my least favorite soccer player on the planet. But you never want to revel in the news that's coming out about him, that's for sure. We don't want to make light of that. I am Dave Denholm. You can hit me up on Twitter at TalkSoccer. People's questions for Bob Bradley are flooding in. If you want to do that as well, hit me up at TalkSoccer. We also have the Premier League preview I'm going to get into. But really, my LA Galaxy have hit a new low. Did you see the way they're playing? And I know Siggy, look, is a good move to bring him in. It had to be done. He'll right the ship. I have firm belief in that. I'm not bailing on the team. This team is dreadful right now. The worst team on the pitch in MLS. And that is not hyperbole. I don't know who they could beat right now consistently. That is not hyperbole. That is the situation they are in. Doesn't mean it can't be fixed. But, man, I am starting to think now this is going to take more than just cool, Siggy, snap of the fingers. Hey, Jonathan Dos Santos, welcome. Here we go. Look out. We're going to vault right up the standings. I mean, there's time, I guess, but we're running out of games here. And there's no indication this team's going to magically turn it around. Jelle Van Damme, is he going? Look, I'm the guy who told you he needed to go before the rumors even came out, before the stories even broke, right? I know I'm the most modest man in the history of radio, and the most modest man you'll find in all of soccer, but I told you he had to go. And now it looks like he might be on his way out. So many things going down. It is just a jam-packed week here. And the Carlos Vela signing for LAFC, you're going to hear a lot of people talking about, this isn't a great signing. Look out. This is great for LAFC. Come on. This dude is talented. Yeah, does Bob Bradley have his work cut out for him? Does he have to harness that? Does he have to build around? Yes. 100%. But is Carlos Vela a worthy talent to be putting out on the field as a designated player, as your first DP in club history? Yes. Of course he is. Absolutely. Could he become a superstar in MLS? You bet. No doubt. The guy is talented every day and twice on Sunday. He's that good. Come on. Don't try to be looking down on this like, oh, this is not a great move. You're just a hater if you're talking about like that. And you know what, El Tree fan? I'm tired of hearing about, oh, no, he's going to MLS. It's going to hurt his Shut up. Seriously, you ain't won anything lately anyway. Stop it. And I still believe El Tree is talented. Carlos Vela can be a part of that. And it's not going to hurt his game to play in him. Just stop. Have you seen Querétaro play lately? Are you kidding me? Have you seen my beloved Pachuca suck lately? And you're worried about him playing in MLS? Give me a break. Coming up next from ESPN FC, joining me, Sebastian Salazar. He's coming up. Soccer Weekly, Dave Denholm and you hanging out on ESPN LA 710. What a massive week here on Soccer Weekly on ESPN LA 710, presented by Puente Hills Toyota. I am Dave Denholm, hanging out with you on the home of world football here in Southern California. It is ESPN LA 710. We've got my LA Galaxy are the worst team in MLS right now after DC United makes a couple of moves before the transfer window closes, including getting Paul Arriola from Tijuana in a big transfer there. We've got my Premier League preview. I've already taken care of the top teams. We'll be talking more about that coming up shortly. We've also got Bob Bradley coming up. But right now, joining me, he's from ESPN FC, and we love his work there. A pleasure to have him on the show, Sebastian Salazar. Sebastian, thanks for taking the time, buddy. Appreciate it.
Hey, no worries. Great to be with you.
Well, Sebastian, the big news out of all that, we still didn't get to the biggest story. That is Carlos Vela coming to LAFC as their first ever DP signing. Sebastian, what does this mean for the club and then for MLS as well?
No, I think for the club, you really couldn't have made a better choice. You know, I think there might be bigger stars out there, but what you want to accomplish in a market, it's really exciting. Obviously, a huge Mexican-American following. You could make a very, very strong argument that Carlos Vela right now is the best player on the national team. Just look at the reaction that Juan Carlos Osorio got when he didn't play him against Germany in the semifinals of the Confederations Cup. So it's a perfect landing for him. I think for LAFC, I'm interested to see about the dynamic between he and Bob Bradley. I'm sure you'll ask him about that. Bradley comes off as a super stern guy. Vela seems a little bit more relaxed, so they may have to come to an agreement, but they're both top-notch professionals, so I think that's kind of what separates them from others who haven't had the success that they've each had in their respective careers. And from the league, man, you got to be salivating. You got a Galaxy team with both Dos Santos brothers. You got Carlos Vela on LAFC, who's coming in, you know, with all of the capabilities and resources to do something Atlanta-esque or greater. And I think you're looking at hitting one of the biggest, most important, both soccer markets and just general media markets in the country, with an overdose of not just soccer, but MLS soccer. And you're also making key inroads into the Mexican-American fan, which is a massive, massive deal for MLS right now. You know, they're not chasing folks who watch the Premier League as much as they were 10 or 15 years ago. They're looking at a very, very specific demographic. These DP signings point us in that direction. And I think the LA market is the spot in the United States to really, really make those inroads.
I love it. I couldn't agree more. Sebastian Salazar is my guest here from ESPN FC. You can check him out on Twitter at Sebi Salazar Foot, F-U-T. I love that. Sebastian, this I think is a little overblown, but I got to ask the question, what does this mean for El Tree with Carlos Vela coming to MLS? So many people panic about that if you're an El Tree fan.
So let's talk about perception and reality, right? Because we watch MLS a lot here, and we know that it's a much different league than it was a decade ago. But I think we also have to be honest with ourselves about where the perception of the league is.
Yeah.
And the perception of the league, when you get beyond our borders, because people don't watch, that's the real truth of it. People don't watch, and they make assumptions. They still believe that the level of play, the level of commitment, the level of affection from the fans is on 2007 and pre-levels. They're a decade behind in the reality. And that's especially true, guys, even though we share a border in Mexico. I mean, I just don't think they consume the league in the way, certainly not in any way comparable to how we in this country consume Liga MX. And so, especially in the media, there is this idea that a Mexican player who leaves Europe, and in some cases, maybe even if you were to come back to Mexico, but definitely if they come back to Major League Soccer, is basically just retiring, an early retirement. Now, people in Mexico will point to what's happened to Giovanni Dos Santos since he came to the LA Galaxy. And the truth is, look, Gio is still getting minutes, still getting important call-ups. He's still a big part of Juan Carlos Osorio's plans, even when he hasn't played well. And the truth is, yeah, 4 times over the last year and a half since Gio came to the U.S., he hasn't played excellent with the national team. And he was incredible in 2014. That game against Holland, for the hour that he was on the field, he was the best player on the field. Maybe I'm a little bit biased. But he is that type of player, and I think Mexican fans haven't seen that level since, and they draw it to where he is at club. I don't think it's that easy. I don't think it's that direct. I think that's oversimplifying it. And I think, again, a lot of that comes from the standard Mexican fan just not having a lot of access or interest in MLS and knowing what the unique challenges of this league are and how they might prepare for the national team. But trust me, the people in Mexico are talking about this. They are hammering Carlos Vela, just like weeks ago they hammered Jonathan Dos Santos. They're saying these guys are taking the easy way out. They're going to LA. They're going for the lifestyle. They're not going to the soccer. And I think it's a little bit disingenuous. You know, anybody in any line of work, they offer you more money and a better job, you're going to take it. And I think that, you know, before we start to worry about these criticisms and what it means to the national team, you know, a guy who's happy in a place and feeling rewarded and feeling in a good place in his career professionally is just as likely, if not more likely, to render you results at the national team level than a guy who's struggling for minutes in Belgium or, you know, a 12th place team in La Liga. You know, I think we think we know what's best for these guys a lot more often than we really know.
And by the way, El Tri fans, Gio Dos Santos was the only one with a pulse against Germany in that bloodbath in the Confederations Cup offensively. He did more things special that game than anybody else in El Tri's uniform that day. Sebastian Salazar is my guest here from ESPN FC here on Soccer Weekly. I'm Dave Denholm, and you are listening to ESPN LA 710. Sebastian, let's turn to Liga MX and my Pachuca. What is wrong with my Pachuca right now?
Man, I forget. Herc told me he was on the show with you, and you're a big Pachuca guy. Look, they made some big moves this off season. But I think Pachuca for so long, and maybe this is why you like them. You know, they had the identity, even though it's you know, they call it cantera versus cartera, right? Mm-hmm. So academy versus wallet, and I think you know they had this identity within the team. Of players who, even if they weren't formed at Pachuca, were young Mexican guys who knew the league, who had run up a bunch of appearances before they were 21, 22, 23 years old. But you have to be honest, that base has either aged out of that or in the case of a guy like Chucky Lozano, which is not just any guy to lose. I mean, if you watched the league at all last year, A, he was the most impactful player, and you know, B, he was the most fouled. They killed him, so he was a magnet to defenders and the ball. The impact that he had on opening space for that team. Yeah. But once you get Keisuke Honda going, once you get these guys rolling, I think there's no shortage of talent there. I love the way they play. I love the style, and so I think you can't overreact in Liga MX to 4 weeks.
Fair enough.
I mean, look at what Tigres did last year. You know, they came out of the gates incredibly slow, closed, and should have won the final. You know, so the season is ups and downs, and I just wouldn't worry about a team that starts slow.
I like your thinking there, Sebastian. Let me ask you about this MLS Top 30 player ranking that you guys had out, which I loved. And Mario Rees, my great producer, and we absorbed this and didn't disagree with too much, but it started some good conversations. You had near the top, of course, the guys like Jovinko and David Villa were right up there. Where will Carlos Vela possibly eventually fit into this type of list?
Great question. So I think there's an obvious. So when I looked at the top few guys, right? To me, there's a top tier, which is Sebastian Jovinko and David Villa. Those are 1 and 1A. Whatever you want to do with those, you can defend it. I went Giovinco. He was my number one, even though I know David Villa came out number one on the overall compilation of the rankings. To me, then there's a drop-off to number 3. But 3 to me is also still very clear. That's Diego Valeri. To me, he's the third best, most impactful, consistent player in MLS. Mm-hmm. To me, Vela's better than Diego Valeri. I don't know that he's better than David Villa or more impactful. I don't think he's better than Sebastian Giovinco. So I put him at number 3, but then clearly in that top tier, if that makes sense. Now your top tier goes from 2 guys to 3 guys, and Valeri is still 4th, but kind of a distant 4th.
Great stuff from Sebastian Salazar. It has been a pleasure. He is on ESPN FC. Check out his work there. Check him out on Twitter at Sebi Salazar Foot, F-U-T. Sebastian, thank you so much for taking the time and breaking it down for us.
Anytime. I'm glad to be with you.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to talk to him. And he is just fantastic when it comes to world football here. And, of course, El Tri. Really appreciate Sebastian Salazar taking the time. Check him out on ESPN FC. They do great stuff over there. I'm always at ESPN FC. And also on Twitter at Sebi Salazar Foot, F-U-T. That's a good name, too. I love that. So great stuff. Look, he's not wrong about Carlos Vela and the impact he can have. I don't know that Carlos Vela can have that type of impact right away with LAFC because you've still got to build a whole team around him. It's not as though Carlos Vela is going to be lacking talent. Where else does the talent come from, though? And they still have plenty of time. Look, they're on the right track. I hate to admit it. You know how much I love my LA Galaxy, the worst team in MLS right now. But I hate to admit it, LAFC is on the right track with that kind of signing. Thanks so much to Sebastian. Coming up, though, still to come, LAFC head coach Bob Bradley will be joining us next. Soccer Weekly, Dave Denholm and you on ESPN LA 710. Soccer Weekly, ESPN LA 710, presented by Puente Hills Toyota. I'm Dave Denholm, hanging out with you, talking the beautiful game like we do every Wednesday here at this time on the home of world football here in Southern California. It is ESPN LA 710. It is a pleasure right now to be joined by the very first manager of LA Football Club. He is Bob Bradley, former U.S. national team manager. Bob, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us here.
Dave, thanks for having me on.
Bob, let's just get right to it. What a day for you. Carlos Vela becomes the first big-name acquisition for LAFC. Bob, let's start it with that. Why Vela?
Oh, I think he's a great talent. He's a guy who is fun to watch. He's exciting. He can score goals. He sets up goals. And I think, when you try to build a team and you do it in a great city like Los Angeles where people know football, you've got to bring in some players that are exciting, fun to watch, and make the rest of the team better.
We are talking with Bob Bradley, the first manager here of LAFC, joining us here on Soccer Weekly. Bob, I asked you this at the press conference where they introduced you. I'm going to ask it again now with the wider audience here. You're a manager who's always been willing to take a look at his talent and kind of mold your style and formation to fit that talent, whatever that is, whatever your strengths are, in whatever particular team you're managing. Now you're building from scratch. What kind of style, what kind of formation should LAFC fans expect from you out of the gate?
I think in terms of formations, Dave, that things are becoming more flexible. So, the idea that certain teams have 4 in the back, but in different moments in the game, if you didn't know, it would look more like 3. But in all of that, the idea that when we have the ball, we know how to keep it, we know how to move it quickly, that there's a mentality that when we lose the ball, we want to win it back quickly. So I think you're right on target that when you come into a situation like this, you want there to be a style of play and a philosophy, and then you try to make sure that you can find players and establish some great starting points.
Bob, what do you like about Los Angeles? You've been here before. What do you like about this city?
I love the diversity of the city. I love the heart of the city. In my coaching career, when you have a chance to do something that connects with the city, and 20 years ago, the team we built in Chicago, I'll never forget the feeling that there was something special between the city, the team, the players. When you're in a place like Cairo, yes, I'm the national team coach, but just knowing what football meant to the fans of Zamalek, the fans of Ali. And so, LA's got that kind of diversity, that type of passion for the game. So I really love that. And then, Dave, I'm a sports fan. And over the years, whether it's the Lakers, the Dodgers, the Kings, I love when a great player is in LA and he's a big name, but more than that, I love when he's successful and his team wins, and then you see how that all works.
We're talking with Bob Bradley, first manager ever of LAFC. This is also a man who won a title in MLS, guiding an expansion team to that title in Chicago Fire in 1998. And, Bob, obviously things are different, no question. But an organization like LAFC doesn't build a nearly $400 million stadium to not be successful. What are the differences in terms of pressure and building now in MLS compared to when you first did that with Chicago nearly 2 decades ago?
Well, of course, there's different rules, and the league has grown in so many ways. But, Chicago is also a sports city, and there was still a great understanding of the game. And so you had to put something on the field right from the beginning that real fans respected. And as I said at the press conference, our first signing was Peter Novak. He had been captain of the Polish national team. And that showed the soccer community in Chicago that we were serious. I think Carlos gives us the same type of immediate respect in Los Angeles, but then you've got to go to work putting the right players around him in place. And a player like Carlos Vela, obviously, to see him do great things on the ball, there's got to be people who play balls to his feet. There's got to be people who win the ball back so that he can get the ball in good position. So, the building of a soccer team, you've got to understand all the details. I'm a huge fan of Barcelona, and if we had guys like Iniesta and Xavi with us today, they would tell you how important Busquets was.
Yeah.
And, Messi would tell you how important Xavi and Iniesta were. So you've got to build a team that has all parts, and that's the way you can be successful.
Obviously, you're working with John Thorrington, who's taking care of the off-the-field, the operations, general manager type stuff. Are there markets or leagues, and this is a question coming from Twitter. We had some great questions that we wanted to pose to you from the fans, from the LAFC. This is one coming from Jordan. He says, are there markets or leagues, Bob, that you're looking at to tap into when it comes to non-designated player signings, those key areas where you can get talent maybe a little more cheaply?
It's a great question. And I as you know, I coached in Chicago. I had 3 years then back with the Metro Stars and 1 year with Chivas USA. And I was always trying to reach out in different communities.
Yeah.
With Metro Stars, I found a young Brazilian defender named Danilo Silva. And the first year we had him with Metro Stars, his knee kept him from playing a lot. Eventually I came to Chivas USA. He left the league. He's been a regular for Dynamo Kiev for many years. So, when you look around Paraguay, Uruguay, Chile, obviously Central America, I had Amado Guevara in the league, and he was league MVP. So you've got to really spread your net. And, I think that when you look at the top clubs in the world these days, they are being proactive trying to find players from different places, and we've got to work in the same way.
I had another good question. This one from Christian. He asks, Bob, what's your opinion of the analytics, the metrics, the telemetry data that's coming out now in all of sport, not just soccer?
I've worked very hard to understand how it works and to know how to tailor it for everything I do. Mm-hmm. So an example is that even when you look at scouting and recruiting, it's not possible to watch players, 1,000 players, but you can use that data to narrow it down to a smaller group. You can give a profile, an age, the kind of player you're looking for, and that data can produce names, and then you can obviously go to work pulling up video and really getting to know the player or seeing them live. So I think analytics has changed all sports, and for me, it's got to be part of how we work at LAFC.
I know you're building, Bob, but what do you expect out of this club? What's the expectations the first couple of seasons here with LAFC in the standings themselves?
I think the expansion team always talks about making the playoffs, but it's important to say that that's sort of just a basic goal as you start. If the team comes together, if the understandings grow and the football gets to be quicker and sharper, then, you know, at different points you start to change. And so if I think back to Chicago, we won our first 2 games, then we lost 5 in a row. And I reminded the players that we're going in the right direction. It's not like we need a new plan. And we proceeded to win 11 games in a row. And somewhere in that period, we knew we were a good team. So I understand in the early seasons you don't want to make outrageous claims, but I want to build a good team. I want to make our football fun to watch. I want to be a team that has a real identity. And if we can do those things, then we'll see what that means as we go through the season.
Talking with manager Bob Bradley, first manager of LAFC, on the heels of signing their newest and first DP, Carlos Vela, who will be joining MLS. Bob, have you had lunch yet with Will Ferrell?
You know, I met Will years ago watching Real Madrid train. And so I've not had a chance to have a lunch with him, but obviously at that moment, I knew what a fan he was, and there he is watching, you know, Cristiano Ronaldo and Benzema and all these guys, and I knew at that point that it's great that the game has grown so much in the country that celebrities like Will Ferrell are out watching Real Madrid train. So I'm looking forward to spending more time with him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. No question about it, Bob. This has been interesting. Thank you so much for taking the time. Bob Bradley, first manager of LAFC, joining me here on Soccer Weekly. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thanks, Dave.
You bet. That's Bob Bradley. He, of course, the former manager of the United States national team, and will now manage LAFC, his second expansion team in MLS. You heard us talking about Chicago Fire when Bradley actually led them to a title in like the 3rd season of MLS. They joined up in 1998. I remember it very well. Unfortunately for my LA Galaxy, I remember it all too well with his Chicago Fire. So thanks again to Bob Bradley joining us. And all the questions that came flying in, I was only able to ask a couple in terms of the time we had based on Twitter. You can hit me up at Talk Soccer, your reaction to what Mr. Bradley said there, the new manager of LAFC. But some fascinating stuff. We had some great questions. He wasn't lying about that. They were fantastic work by you. We still have so much more to get to. I got to tell you more about the Premier League, which gets going. Can you believe this show? We are packed here on the home of world football. It's Soccer Weekly on ESPN LA 710. This is Soccer Weekly, ESPN LA 710, presented by Puente Hills Toyota. Get your new 2017 Toyota Camry LE today at Puente Hills Toyota. Check them out, PuenteHillsToyota.com. Great interview with Bob Bradley. We just had that. Great interview with Seb Salazar earlier. Sebastian Salazar of ESPN FC joined me earlier in the show. Also talked about the Premier League, the top of the table. I believe it's Man City's year, going along with teams like Chelsea and Man United and Tottenham. Those are my top 4. Arsenal, Liverpool just on the outside looking in. But I will say this. If you missed anything, go to the podcast each and every week. I mean, Jesse Lopez does some voodoo on some machine over there. It's just amazing. Minutes after I leave the studio, seconds virtually, that podcast will be ready for you on iTunes. Just all you got to do is search Soccer Weekly for your podcast. And by the way, subscribe, rate, and review it, please. You can even be harsh on me if you hate me or hate the show. I can handle it. Please do that. Would appreciate it. But if you miss anything throughout the week, especially that Bob Bradley interview and, of course, the talk with Sebastian Salazar, it has been a massive show, and we continue right now. Let's go to the phone lines. And Eddie in the Valley, you are up here on Soccer Weekly with Dave Denholm. Welcome, Eddie.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me. Just real quick, last time I called was the eve of the Mexican final. Told you Chivas had nothing to lose. How you like me now, Dave?
Eddie ain't lying from the Valley. He was right.
Yeah. And then I want to talk about Carlos Vela real quick.
Yeah, sure.
So I've tried to give the MLS a chance. I mean, American-born Mexican. I've, followed along since the inception, the Jorge Campos days, Cienfuegos, Caligiuri, Andrew Shue. I've tried to give it a shot when Carlos Vela came over, Luis Hernandez, Gio, Jonathan. But you know what? It's never really felt right. Long story short, Carlos Vela, I want to see how big of a signing it is. Just yesterday when they announced that he signed with LAFC, I immediately went online and I donated my money buying a couple of season tickets.
Wow. Well, Eddie, thank you there you go. I mean, that's the bottom line right there. The bottom line is the bottom line. And Eddie, who has been following an MLS on the periphery for a long time, right? He's been following Major League Soccer for those years on the periphery, he says, right? Couldn't quite go all in with both feet. Carlos Vela, boom. LAFC has a new season ticket. I mean, look, that's all you need to know. Thanks for the phone call, Eddie. Appreciate that. I mean, make of it what you will, but Eddie ain't lying. And that's pretty amazing. That leaves an impression.
What time is it? It's stoppage time! Yeah, stoppage time! It's stoppage time! Right now!
The great Mario Rees, our producer here at Soccer Weekly. It is stoppage time, Mario. What do we got, baby?
All right, Dave. So a lot of Mexican national team stars have recently made the jump into MLS. Latest, of course, Carlos Vela to LAFC, Jonathan Dos Santos a couple weeks ago to Galaxy, and his brother a couple years ago. But there's been a lot of criticism, Dave. A lot of criticism from the Mexican media on the choice to play in MLS.
We heard Seb Salazar mention that, yeah.
Yeah. And Chicharito has defended his fellow Mexican teammates for making the move to MLS, and he believes that the national team will continue including Vela, regardless of the league he plays in. Which side are you on, Dave?
Well, I don't disagree with Chicharito in principle. MLS is fine for these players. Like I said, Gio Dos Santos was the best offensive player El Tri had against Germany. Now, they got crushed in that game, so everybody thought they all played terrible. Dos Santos played great in that game. And by the way, when things are clicking for the Galaxy, which has not been often this year, most of the time that's through Dos Santos. He made a couple of passes in this last bloodbath we suffered through that were brilliant. It's just that he's got Jack McInerney running up front in front of him. So, come on. We've seen Gio Dos Santos play very well in MLS when Robbie Keane and he were clicking together. That's overblown. However, by the way, Chicharito, he also didn't sign with MLS, and it appears he's allergic to wanting to sign with MLS.
Right.
Otherwise, I might believe him a little bit more. I agree with his sentiment. I might believe what he's saying a little bit more. If he actually came to MLS and joined LA Galaxy like he could have, or even joined LAFC, or the number of other teams that have likely approached him. Come on. Great stuff, Mario Rees. Thank you so much. Jesse Lopez, thank you for listening. As always, check out go to iTunes, check out the podcast, search for Soccer Weekly, subscribe, rate, and review that. We would appreciate it. Thanks so much to LAFC head coach Bob Bradley. Check out that interview on the podcast. And ESPN FC Sebastian Salazar. I'm Dave Denholm, and you are listening to Soccer Weekly on ESPN LA 710.